Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning back in once again to Queen Amadai TV Presents True Crimes. So as you're coming in, please feel free to go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. Hold on, let me get the right banner up here. Okay. Hold on just a moment, people. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at QueenAshakur. Also on Instagram at divine_goddess_27, Twitter at dgoddess27, Brighton and Patreon at Queen Amadai Okay? Let's go ahead and like and share the video. Subscribe to the channels if you haven't done so. Click the notification bell, click the word all so you're notified each time I go live. And if you have not been receiving your notifications, blame it on YouTube, but also double check to make sure you're still subscribed. Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, Rain Love, Queen Adia, Iyama Bay, Kathy B. Rain Love, I need your email. Please send me your email to queenamadashakur.com. Okay, I need your email so I can send you the information for the mod meetings. Hello, Dervis October, Paradigm, Craig, Dervis, Felicia, Queen Adia is Black, Lady E, Pearly. All right. So thank you all for tuning in. Hello, Lehar, Ryan, LeVar, Roslyn, Silent D is Black. Let's get into this nefarious story. Okay, I'm going to be talking about the Black Dahlia. This is an unsolved mystery. They never did find out who killed this young woman 70 plus years ago, I do believe. So let's get into it. Very interesting, people. She said my name. Craig, cut it out. Okay. All right, people. So let's get into it. Hold on. Let me get these receipts. Here we go. Now I have a couple of lives coming after this one. I have another one starting at 2:30 and then one at 3:10. So please make sure you make it right black to the chats. Okay? Now, so let's talk about it. I'm going to be showing you some pictures of this lovely young lady who was murdered in a most nefarious way. So on the morning of January the 15th of 1947, a mother taking her child for a walk in Los Angeles in a neighborhood stumbled upon a gruesome sight. It was the body of a young naked woman who had been sliced clean in half at the waist. Now, the body was just a few feet from the sidewalk and posed in such a way that the mother reportedly thought it was a mannequin at first glance. Now, despite the extensive mutilation and cuts to the body, there wasn't a drop of blood left at the scene, indicating that the young woman had been killed elsewhere. So that all being said, whoever killed her likely, drained all of the blood from her body and then carried her corpse and placed it in this area. Okay, so nefarious. Now, the ensuing investigation was led by the LA Police Department. The FBI was asked to help, and it quickly identified the body just 56 minutes, in fact, after getting blurred fingerprints via sound photo, which was a primitive fax machine used by the news services from Los Angeles back then. Now, the young woman turned out to be a 22-year-old Hollywood hopeful by the name of Elizabeth Short, later dubbed the Black Dahlia by the press. And that was because of the way she wore a lot of black clothing, her rumored pinchets of sheer black clothes. And there was a movie out at the time called Blue Dahlia. Okay, and they said she resembled the actress who played in that movie. If you ask me, she looks a lot like Linda Carter, who played Wonder Woman in the 70s. So anyway, Short's prints, her fingerprints actually appeared twice in the FBI's massive collection. More than 100 million were on file at the time, fingerprints, that is. Now, first, because she had applied for a job as a clerk at the commissary of the Army's Camp Cook in California in January of 1943. And the second reason they had her prints was because she had been arrested by the Santa Barbara police for underage drinking just several months prior. Now, the Bureau also said her mugshot was in their files, and they provided that to the press. So I'm going to share my screen to show you this picture. Hey, Howard, to show you this picture of her. Okay. Now, this is her, Elizabeth Short. And like I said, she was 22 years old, and she had come to Los Angeles because she wanted to be an actress. Okay. Also nefarious, people, what happens to her. So let me continue. And this was the newspaper heading that was put out at the time of her death. Now, in support of the LA police, the FBI ran records checks on potential suspects, and they conducted interviews across the nation based on early suspicions that the murderer may have had skills in dissection because the body was so cleanly cut. Okay, so agents were also asked to check out a group of students at the University of Southern California Medical School. And in a tantalizing potential break in the case, the Bureau searched for a match to the fingerprints found on an anonymous letter that may have been sent to authorities by the killer, but the prints weren't found in the FBI files. Now, who killed the Black Dahlia and why? It was the mystery. The murderer has never been found, and given that much time has passed, likely never will be. Now, that's clearly crazy. But so now here's the thing. Here's another article that I have about this. Now, one of the things is back then, a lot of young women, they would go out on dates with men just as a way to get a meal to eat. They called it dining for dates or dating for dining or something like that, where they didn't have a lot of money and they may have been struggling. And so they would go out on dates with men who asked them out just so they could have a free meal. Some people still do that in 2020, but nevertheless, so there's no telling, as far as they were concerned, who could have done this to her, right? Because she dated many men. Now, so anyway, the beautiful 22-year-old brunette had traveled to Hollywood hoping to make it in the movies. And the tragic result was a horrendous murder where her corpse was discovered severed in two pieces at the waist. One of her breasts was severely and hideously mutilated. And they took a knife and they cut the sides of her face so that it looked like she was smiling while she was dead, like pretty much like a Cheshire cat, right? And they actually called it a hideous Glasgow smile. Now, the name Glasgow smile comes from the geographic origin being Glasgow, Scotland. The street gangs used the smile as a torturous trademark when fighting with one another. So that's why they called it that. Now, however, the grin was used much more often by gangs in Chelsea, England, and eventually became known as the Chelsea grin. Either way, it was disgusting. Now, the way it's made is to make small incisions in the corners of the victim's mouth, then to beat the victim mercilessly until the slits tear and reach their ears. Because, of course, if you're beating them, they're going to be screaming. So that makes it just rip. That is so nefarious and disgusting that anybody would even think of this. So anyway, they go on to say Short's brief life hasn't been well documented, but her death was much more detailed, as well as the nationwide manhunt for her killer. Now, Short's life began in Medford, Massachusetts, where she lived with her father, Cleo, and her mother, Phoebe Sawyer, and three sisters. Cleo Alvin Short Jr. managed to make a fairly affluent living by building miniature golf courses. In 1930, when Elizabeth was 6 years old, Cleo abandoned the family. He left his car empty on a bridge as if to appear that he had committed suicide. Now, of course, that wasn't the case, right? However, the children, they did believe it. Now, perhaps Cleo wasn't a family man. Maybe he found his problem with alcohol too difficult to raise his family. Or he was too stressed about the financial hardships of taking care of 6 people every day. Either way, he ended up and left for Vallejo, California, without a word for several years. Around that time, Cleo contacted Phoebe to ask if he could return to the family. I guess the grass was green on the other side, as he obviously thought. So he was done with the family. Well, she said no. She told him he couldn't come back. So he was done with the family and never interacted with them again, with one exception, and that was Elizabeth. Now, at the age of 19, Elizabeth contacted her father and asked if she could live with him. In exchange, she promised to keep house for him. Now, Cleo agreed and sent his daughter $200 in moving expenses. That would be about $2,000 today, by the way. Now, apparently, Cleo's purse strings had loosened a little. However, it was Elizabeth who strained the father-daughter relationship. She didn't keep her end of the bargain. She slept the day away and went out all nights. She barely cleaned and didn't cook Cleo's meals as was promised. And after several weeks in a particularly volatile fight, Cleo threw his daughter out of the house. That was the end of the chapter in Elizabeth's life. Now, undaunted, the spunky teenager decided to travel around the States and wanted to travel around the States a little and find whatever work that she could to sustain herself. So for a while, she worked as a camp cook on a military base for servicemen. Bases were everywhere, considering that it was during the period of World War II. Now, that suited Elizabeth just fine. She had a thing for men in uniform. How peculiar, but what was funny is that she had never heard of any of them before. The servicemen at Camp Cook were just as enthralled with her as she was with them. And in fact, they voted her the camp cutie. However, Elizabeth was chaste. She was decent. She was a decent girl who wasn't known to give herself away to any men, although she did date numerous of them. Now, her employer actually stated that Elizabeth reminded her of a girl straight out of a convent. After a few months, a restless Elizabeth traveled to Santa Monica. A Joker smile cut on her face, so vicious. Absolutely, Lee Harv. Absolutely. Rain Love says casting couch and stuff. Yes, absolutely. So after a few months, a restless Elizabeth traveled to Santa Monica, where a naughty girl, being a naughty girl, she was arrested for underage drinking. Even her mugshot was gorgeous. She was a small built woman, and Short was modeling. She was getting, she wanted to be in movies in the future. Following her arrest, she was sent back to Medford for the juvenile authorities in Santa Barbara. However, Short wasn't one to be hampered by a silly little thing such as the law. She moved to Florida to live with relatives or friends with occasional visits to Massachusetts. Now, it was probably the only happy fate for Short in her life was that she met Matthew Michael Gordon. She met him in Florida. Now, Gordon was a decorated United States Army Air Force officer. The two fell in love and were constantly seen together until he was sent to India. Short told friends Gordon had written to her to ask her hand in marriage. She had accepted his proposal, but then Gordon died in a plane crash August the 10th of 1945 before he could return to the United States. Short was totally devastated. Gordon's mother sent her an odd telegram that read, "Our sympathies are with you." Short moved to Los Angeles in July of 1946 to visit Army Air Force Lieutenant Joseph Gordon Fickling, an old boyfriend she had met during the war. Now, eventually, Short moved in with Fickling, but the arrangement worked about as well as her living arrangement with her father, Cleo. After only a few weeks, Fickling told her she had to go. Oddly, the two remained friends until the end of her life. Now, while in Hollywood, Short worked at a number of places as a waitress. One noteworthy establishment was the Florentine Gardens, owned and operated by a seedy type named Mark Hansen. Now, Hansen was the type of man who only hired gorgeous young women to dance as hostesses with lonely servicemen, and he also offered them a room in his house when they were down on their luck. So Hansen became the lucky one when the two of them moved in. Now, for a time, Short and Hansen were romantically involved, but when he tried unsuccessfully to go to bed with her, that cooled off and he just threw her right on out. Now, this woman just didn't have a good run of luck with male roommates. However, Short fared better with female roommates. For several weeks, she lived with an acquaintance named Marjorie Graham, also from Massachusetts. And although the two women didn't really know each other, they got along pretty well. Eventually, Graham returned to Massachusetts, and Short then moved into another apartment complex with several other women. all of whom were dancers, models, or actresses. Now, keep in mind that this was Hollywood and beautiful young hopefuls were a dime a dozen at this time, right? So since Elizabeth didn't like to work, she was always broke and always hungry. But she had an easy fix for that. She dated several men that she met at bars and in clubs. They usually took her out for dinner. Sometimes they gave her spending cash and bought her cheap jewelry. Short wasn't a prostitute, however. She was an opportunist and a tease. Short became known as such, although in spite of this, men still lined up to date the beautiful girl. Now, her rambling lifestyle and association with so many men was a dangerous combination. However, her reputation would be smeared far worse after her murder. The press portrayed her as a woman who prowled Hollywood Boulevard and falsely described her as wearing tight skirts and sheer blouses. Actually, Short was a lovely, fashionable dresser wearing modest blouses, often buttoned to the neck, and loose-fitting skirts. She didn't dress only in black either, as they said. She favored pink and blue. Now, on July the 15th of 1947, Mrs. Betty Bersinger was walking her 3-year-old in her stroller outside along the west side of South Norton Avenue. Now, between West 39th Street and Coliseum Street, she saw what appeared to be a mannequin that had been broken in half beside a vacant lot. Upon closer inspection, Bersinger saw that the mannequin was very white. As she walked to a nearby house to report the find to the police, she puzzled over the doll. Why would anyone sever a mannequin in half, then place it near the sidewalk where anyone could find it? It just didn't seem to make any sense. Now, a woman living in a nearby house allowed her to use the phone, and Bersinger called the police. And when she called them, she said, someone better do something. Now, according to the police, they arrived quite promptly, although not before the LA Examiner, who often intercepted police radio waves. They showed up, and the press was already snapping photos and trampling all over the scene by the time the police arrived. Now, pictures show poor Short severed to the waist, with her upper torso placed several inches to the side and above her lower torso and legs. However, it was rumored that Short had been placed in an even more obscene pose in the beginning. You see, her upper half was placed on her legs in such a position as to make it seem as if she was performing oral sex on herself. That's how disgusting the person was. So they cut her in half, and they took the upper half of her body and put it on her bottom half with her face in her own private area. Okay, just to be obscene. And yes, very barbaric. And when the police arrived and saw that, they removed it, so it wouldn't, be reported by the media and all of that stuff. So they wouldn't see that. So the police put her in a more respectable pose. Now, the autopsy revealed that Elizabeth Short had been beaten, stabbed, and slashed with a butcher knife for at least 2 days. She may have died of exsanguination, which is loss of blood, basically, from blows to her head and the bleeding from her mouth. Now, however, she may have been alive when the killer severed her in half between the second and third lumbar vertebrae, although it is believed she was likely unconscious by then or in a coma. Now, thank the Lord for small mercies if she was unconscious, hopefully, or in a coma. So she was completely drained of all of her blood, although her internal organs were intact, except for her intestines, which were partially pulled out of her lower torso and tucked beneath her buttocks. Very disgusting, whoever did this. And I'm going to think that whoever did this, she was a moocher. Some don't take that lightly to usury. Well, I guess that's the case. But now, here's the thing. That's still no excuse to do all these heinous things they did to her, even if she was using people or whatever. But the thing is, whoever cut her in half, I believe they placed her body in a bathtub and drained it of the blood. So they wouldn't track blood everywhere, get it in their vehicle when they were taking her body to place it on the grass, wherever they found it at. I think that that's what they likely did, because otherwise they'd have gotten blood everywhere in the place wherever they killed her. So I think they probably put her in a bathtub, more likely than not. So anyway, her intestines were partially tucked under her buttocks. Now, of course, all hell broke loose all over Los Angeles and Hollywood. A massive manhunt began, and police interviewed no less than 1,000 people, including witnesses and suspects, of whom there were many, and there was maybe at least 23 of them. Naturally, police suspected medical surgeons or butchers because of the way she was cut in half. And it was someone who had surgical precision, okay, because they cut her clean. It was a clean cut, wasn't jagged, you know, like they didn't know what they were doing. It was done with surgical precision. So they absolutely thought that either it was a surgeon or it was a butcher. So another suspect, quite fittingly, had worked in a funeral home before he moved to Los Angeles. Ultimately, police were able to locate the man that they believed had murdered Short, and they traced and retraced every possible lead that they had. Detective Harry Hansen, who was assigned to the case, stated, "I didn't meet the killer in my interviews. There was no way he slipped past us." This is what he said. Now, you may wonder why it is that Short's murder became so famous when there were hundreds of beautiful women in Los Angeles who met with equally horrible circumstances and fates relatively unknown today. The reason is simple. Not only was Short young and beautiful, but the name that the press dubbed her, the Black Dahlia, and there was a movie out at the time called The Blue Dahlia, that's what got her a lot of attention. A movie that had been released the previous year, although the Dahlia in the film wasn't a person, it was a nightclub. But the person who starred in the movie, they say she looked like that person. I think so. But she looks more like Linda Carter, who played Wonder Woman. Now, Detective Hansen was convinced that the exotic name given to Short by the press was the reason why Short's murder remained on the front page of and the headlines for as long as it did, which was about 2 months, and why it still fascinates people today, with two exceptions at the time of the murder. One of the exceptions was Cleo Short and Matt Gordon's family. Now, when informed of his daughter's murder and asked to identify the body, Cleo adamantly refused, telling investigators that he was through with all of that, meaning his family. He didn't attend his daughter's funeral. And as for Gordon, the guy she had been dating, perhaps due to humiliation or the fear that they would become ostracized due to the connection, vehemently denied that their late son had been engaged to or ever was involved with Elizabeth Short. So that was the family of the young man that she was dating, the one that asked her to marry him. The family denied any, connection between the two of them. And to this day, Short is Los Angeles's most famous cold case, yet just a cardboard box among thousands in the LAPD archives. So I think that the fiance's family was likely embarrassed because all this stuff came out in the press about her dating all these different men and how she was dating to get meals and stuff. And of course, they said that she dressed with tight skirts and all that stuff, which apparently wasn't true. But nevertheless, that's what the press said. And so that's what people ran with. And so that's probably why they didn't want to make it seem like there was a connection. But it would be years later when this man would come out. I think his name was Hodel. And he would say that he believed he knew who her killer was. Said that he believed he knew who her killer was. And hold on just a moment, because I'm going to pull that receipt up. In fact, he thought it was his own father. Let me see if this is it. Hold on, people. Let me get my receipts. In the meantime, everyone, please like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Okay, hold on. Here it is right here. Here it is. Who was George Hodel? And it says the I Am the Night Doctor was a suspect in the Black Dahlia murder. Okay, so in 1947, the death of Elizabeth Short, more commonly known as the Black Dahlia murder, became one of the most famous cold stories in history. Short's killer was never identified, although a number of people were suspected of the tragic deed. One of those suspects was a man by the name of George Hodel, whose son, Steve Hodel, has actually accused him of being the killer of the Black Dahlia. Now, Hodel, they made a mini series about this whole story about her death. It was on TNT, and it was called "I Am the Night." So, anyway, Hodel died in 1999. Now, he was never convicted of the murder, but his son Steve still believes that he was guilty of the killing. Now, as the Guardian reported in 2016, Steve Hodel, the son of the man that he thinks, they think may have killed her, he found photographs among his late father's belongings that he believed were pictures of Elizabeth Short, who was just 22 at the time of her death. They say this isn't just a conspiracy theory either, because Steve Hodel is a former Los Angeles police officer. Actually, he was a detective, and he used his investigative skills to come to the conclusion about his father. Now, the Guardian points out that the way Short was killed involved a procedure that George Hodel may have learned in medical school in the 1930s. And a letter to the police that was reportedly from Short's killer seemed to match George Hodel's handwriting. Now, remember I told you all there was a letter that the police received, and they felt that it was from the killer. They didn't know who wrote it. And they tested the fingerprints, but the fingerprints weren't in the system because the person had obviously never been arrested, right? So, but the fingerprints seemed to match George Hodel, his handwriting. Now, still, it's worth remembering that the LAPD never determined that George Hodel had any involvement in her death. But the Guardian notes that a handwriting test comparing his writing and the killer's reported letter was inconclusive. But the outlet also notes that then Assistant District Attorney Stephen Kay agreed with Steve Hodel. Even the district attorney thought that George Hodel did and agreed with his son. Now, Steve also went on to write a book titled Black Dahlia Avenger, the true story, which was a New York Times bestseller. So in the movie, I Am the Night, or the miniseries, it basically focused on Pine's fictitious character, Jay and George Hodel's granddaughter, Fayuna Hodel. So with that all being said, the Guardian reported that the doctor abandoned the family shortly after Steve's 9th birthday. Now, George Hodel was also accused of molesting his daughter, Tamar, Fayuna's biological mom. He faced sexual assault charges, but he was acquitted of incest in 1949. Now, however, the trial led to the LAPD bugging his house. And according to a 2003 Associated Press article, they said they had, planted bugs in his house to try to find out if he actually did what he was accused of. Now, the AP notes that one of the things that the detective heard through the wires was they actually heard Hodel saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore either, because she's dead." Now, that's what they have him on record saying when they bugged his house about the molestation that he was accused of. He said, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." So why would anybody be saying that if they didn't have anything to do with it? Like, who would even be thinking that, right? George Hodel died in 1999 after suffering from congestive heart failure at the age of 91. Steve Hodel provided the details of his father's death in his book, Most Evil Avenger, Zodiac and the Further Serial Murders of Dr. George Hodel. Based on the trailer, it looks like the movie, I Am Not the Night, will be focused on Fayuna Hodel, not on George's actions. But let me tell you all something. Here's a picture of George Hodel. I'm going to show you all this. Let me share my screen so you all can see what he looks like. But let me tell you something. I saw an interview or something they did with his son years ago, and all the information his son had, and I absolutely think he did kill her too. I absolutely think he did. First of all, the pictures that the son found looked like her without her makeup, and then also the handwriting looked just like the same as the killer's handwriting, in my opinion. And the fact that he said that stuff on the recording, it absolutely sounds like he did it. And he was a police detective, mind you. right? I'm sorry, no, his son was the police detective. He was a detective. He was a doctor. He was a surgeon, so he would know how to make those incisions. That's him right there. And so some people actually think that he was also the lipstick serial killer and the Zodiac serial killer. They think he was all of those and that he just never got caught for any of it. And so his son put a lot of the information which led him to think these things in his book. So that's clearly a nefarious story, right? Clearly crazy. So there is another article that has information that you may not know about the Black Dahlia. Hold on, let me put this up. 5 things to know about the notorious murder of the Black Dahlia. And so let me just go over that. Then I'm going to move on because it's time to start that other live. Okay. I'm going to share my screen so you all can see this. Okay, it says, I'm going to read this because it's just showing the script. It says on January the 15th, 1947, I'm sorry, but she was found by a mother on a walk with her daughter. Here are 5 things you may not know about the murders all time. Aspiring actress Elizabeth Short, age 22, got her nickname from the Black Dahlia from the press. It was allegedly a reference to her black appearance and her resemblance to the star of the Blue Dahlia movie at the time. Short was discovered naked, cut in half, and completely drained of blood. The woman who found her body initially thought it was. Investigators found no blood at the scene and believed she was killed elsewhere. Short was also missing organs in her feet, making it look like she was blind. A retired homicide detective believes his own physician father is the killer. Steve Hodel had found handwritten letters during his investigation of his father. And that's the letter that was sent to the police. In 2013, Hodel brought a cadaver dog to search his father's old home. The dog indicated where a body may have been kept. And soil samples confirmed the presence of human remains. Dr. George Hodel was confirmed to be on the LAPD's short list of suspects. So listen, even before the son thought that his father had something to do with it, back in 1947, when they conducted the initial investigation, he was already one of the suspects even back then. The father was Dr. George Hodel. When authorities bugged his house in the 1950s, they recorded him supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. The case opened and solved more than 70 years later. Many believe the murder will never be solved. Leading theories are that Dr. Hodel paid off investigators and the LAPD covered up the murder. So they think that this doctor paid off the cops. Or the press obstructed the investigation by withholding evidence. The Black Dahlia case had a significant impact on pop culture. A 2006 film, a death metal, and an American Horror Story episode have all been inspired by Elizabeth Short's mysterious and grotesque murder. The Biltmore Hotel, where Short was allegedly last seen, even serves a Black Dahlia cocktail made from vodka, Kahlua, and Chambord black raspberry liquor. So anyway, there you have it, people. Clearly nefarious. Did he kill his secretary too? Lady E, that's what I was wondering, because the way he said it sounds like he killed her, so she couldn't tell anything. And then you have to think about it. If he was messing around with Elizabeth Short, he likely killed her because she wouldn't have sex with him, or maybe he felt like she used him, played him, or whatever. And here's another thing that they didn't say in the articles. They said that Elizabeth Short, her private area was, what's the word? Deformed. I'm not going to say deformed. They said, but she had infantile private parts. So maybe that's why she wasn't sleeping around with people. But they said her private parts were infantile, like really small for a grown woman. So I've never heard of that, but I'm just telling you what they said, okay? And I find it very interesting that whoever this nefarious demon was that killed her put her face in her own crotch to make it look like she was doing that to herself. Clearly nefarious, okay? Yes, he killed her, says Millie. I believe so. Just like OJ supposed I did. Yeah, OJ did say that, right? And he wrote a book about it. How crazy. So with that all being said, Queen, I sent you an email. I was busy earlier. I'm sorry I was able to make the meeting. I definitely, oh, don't worry about the CH464. Honey, listen, as long as you all make at least 2 meetings per month, okay? That'll be just fine. All right, Jamie says, disgusting. Absolutely. So thank you all for tuning in once again to Queen Amadai TV Presents True Crimes. I'm going to be coming right black, okay? I'm going straight into the next video because I'm already running late with the starts. We're going to be talking about Deborah Evans, the true story of a woman whose baby was snatched out of the womb, okay? They literally cut out the fetus. All right, so we're going to talk about that, and I'll be returning right black. Hope to see you all right black in the chat. Make sure you like and share the video. Subscribe to the channels if you haven't done so. And when you click the like button, people, please make sure that you see it light up because YouTube has been messing with the likes so that I don't really, they don't really go through, okay? Thanks, Queen. Missed you today at the meeting. That's okay, Nervous Beloved. You're welcome. Okay, so I will talk to you all again soon. Peace.